So back in December, Microsoft sent us a couple of Surface Duo phones. And I'm here with my brother, Matt, because they sent Matt a phone, they sent me a phone under this campaign that they called the Power Duos campaign, the power of two. So what I wanted to do with the Surface Duo is talk about it with Matt. I talk about technology all the time with Matt. Like me, he's been in this business for a long, long time. We've both been tablet users since about 2002, 2003 timeframe. So we're very experienced in this space. And we're both huge advocates of using pens on devices, and we're really, really interested in multimodal computing, there it is. So Matt's got a lot of expertise like I do in this space. We both do training. We both started a business together. And so, yeah, we work together in this space, and we work pretty closely with Microsoft as well. So welcome, Matt.
Nice to be here. Well, we saw the Duo 1 come out, and you and I talked about getting one. We couldn't get them in Australia, of course, so having to sort of grey import one from the States, but we held off, and I'm glad we did, because the Surface Duo that we've been sent is pretty cool. We were certainly going to get one of these to play with when they announced them coming to the Australian market, but really nice to get them sent to us from Microsoft to have a play with and to give our thoughts and opinions on what it can do for us.
Yeah. Look, it's been a really fascinating journey in the couple of months that we've had them already. It's not even a couple of months, actually. If anybody's particularly focused, they might notice that I've actually now got a black Surface Duo 2. And that's because in mid-December, I was going away on a camping trip, and I put my Surface Duo 2 on the back of the car and drove off, discovered that it was missing about 20 minutes later, and it has never been seen again. So that was a bit disappointing for me. All that free merch that Microsoft sent us, I just threw it away out the window, and I had to get a new replacement. So this I've actually paid for. This is my replacement. I got a black one, which I'm really, really happy with. So I'm pretty invested in this product now, having been given one and bought one as well. I wanted to just pose the question, though, for our discussion, Matt, is why on earth does this thing exist?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And, from our history in computing, the screen size debate has been raging since we first got mobile computers. Our HP TC1100's about that A4 sort of size. And, the early Fujitsu tablets and those sorts of tablets that we sort of cut our teeth into, Toshiba as well as brands, like they were that traditional laptop 10 to 12 inch size screen. In the early 2000s, we saw that UMPC that Samsung did so well with that Q1 and some others as well, companies that don't exist anymore like Viliv and others, right, came out with smaller screen Windows devices because people have always debated what's the best screen size for them. Even at their desks, we see people with massive wraparound monitors versus, I know you and I are different in that space. I use 3 monitors at my desk. You use one big one, a nice widescreen monitor. But when we go mobile, we see people carrying around large 15-inch plus devices as mobile devices.
Yeah, I think mobile.
Yeah, portable rather than mobile, but it does look ridiculous, doesn't it, carrying on that big a device? But it goes back to, I remember a conversation we had with a potential customer many, many years ago, and he said to us, I want a 17-inch tablet. I want a 17-inch tablet with a minimum terabyte of space. And this was about 2005-06 that this guy told us this, right? It's got to be 17 inches and I need a terabyte of space. And when we said,
and it needs to have 3-day battery life or something.
Yeah, something else like that, right? Yeah, it's going to last all week because I work remotely. I mean, that device didn't exist. He goes, yeah. The technology's just not there yet. But go back before tablets, Brett. Look about the phones. I mean, I remember working in offices where the new phone was tiny, and I can't remember the brand, but the supervisor I worked under in my building days, he came in with this tiny mobile phone. Hardly any screen, and now that was the epitome of mobile phones because it was so.
I think it was
so small.
Was it Ericsson that came out with they had one of the really smallest phones, and like the movie Zoolander, that was the trend at the time. Everything was getting smaller and smaller, and then we saw this complete reversal which we have for now, the last sort of 10 years, phones have been getting bigger and bigger. I remember some of the early Samsungs. They had a couple of phones that were like really large, like 5-6-inch screens, and they were ridiculous at the time, compared to the iPhone, which had like a 3.5 or 4-inch screen or something. It was tiny.
Yeah, and the terminology matches the ridiculousness of those, right? Phablet came out as a word, and these we've got new terms being coined for these sorts of screens. But what I noticed about this today, just thinking about what we're going to talk about, was we're back at a UMPC size device with this Surface Duo. Ultra mobile PC, for those of you that aren't as old as us and don't remember those early 2000s.
They were sort of about 7 or 8 inches in size, those screens. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much, I can't remember exactly what the spec is here, but it's somewhere, I think it's about 8 or 9 inches that we're at. Yeah. Or maybe it's less than that. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
But obviously the flexibility of folding device, you know, one screen versus two screens. And I have to say from a screen size perspective as to why we have these devices, that I've really enjoyed the ratio of the individual screen and also the combined screens. And I suppose the test of that, because I've still got, in fact, I've passed on my Note 20 to one of my children, and I pulled that up the other day to do something on it for her, for Holly. And straight away, the screen ratio sort of offended me. You know, I felt like, and when we see this everywhere we go too, right? So if you're sitting in an airport lounge, well, not that we've done that for quite some time, but if you're sitting anywhere where there's people, you see them doing this with their mobile phones, right? Because as we get older, we need glasses, and our short sight goes, and you know.
Now you're a bit older than me, a little bit, and we're both pushing 50 now. So we're, you know, I remember talking to an optometrist years ago, said over 40, your eyesight's going to deteriorate, and so we're well and truly in that category. And I remember,
sorry, go on.
Mum used to do that all the time with their phone, right? She used to hold it away, and now I'm doing that all the time as well, because, you know, like you say, even with my glasses, my optometrist is telling me I need to get bifocals now, so that I'll be able to see up close, which is a bit of a pain. But I mean, we are seeing people do that. I was in the same boat as you, because I had to go back. I've still got my Note 20 as well, and I had to go back and use that for a week while I was without my Surface Duo 2. And although what I found with the Duo 2 is that a lot of the apps, they're not really optimized for that 3x2 screen. But it is so limiting when you want to do when you want to get things done. That screen ratio of some ridiculous ratio, 21:9 or something it is on the Note 20. It's quite limiting. It's great for scrolling content, but it's really limiting for taking notes, getting things done, creating documents, all of those sorts of things. So,
and that comment, Brett, that comment around scrolling versus doing is probably the reason why we have this device. Yeah, because I'm definitely finding that I'm doing more on the Duo than I was on my Galaxy Note. Both had pens, which is important to me, but I'm doing less scrolling.
Yeah, that's what I want to get to in this discussion. But just thinking about what people are trying to do on their phones as well. Like I always sort of sit back with my family, my wife, watching what they're doing on their phone, and I'm so often the one that's saying, "Why are you trying to do that on your phone?" Right? Because it's just too small to be able to manage that easily. You need to be able to correspond bits and pieces of information together. You're hopping between apps and browser tabs, things like that. This is really unproductive. Why not do it on your computer? And the reason they're doing that on the phone is it's much more convenient because it's in your hand already. It's always with you, always on you. But it is really limiting having that small screen. And you can see people working with those devices stumbling over themselves all the time to get things done.
This is over the holiday break. I've been working on cars. So a couple of my kids have project cars that we're working on together, and you know, you've got a screwdriver in your hand, but you need something else, and so you try and do it with the screwdriver because that's what's in your hand. And that's the scenario that we see all the time, right? So
So screwdriver is a hammer.
Yeah,
is
that's
that
right.
What you're saying?
Everything's a hammer. Everything's a hammer, or a hammer does everything, depending on which sort of a tradesperson you are, right? But yeah, so the tool in your hand, that sort of what's the barrier there for us to getting up and getting the right tool to do it with? And, there are still some things in this device that I go, no, I need to do it on my Surface Pro because of the screen size and that better A4 size screen and a bit more full feature in some things. But yeah, I'm definitely finding that this size, and it really is like having more than one tool in your pocket because you are using a single screen that doubles. So and we'll talk about that as we go through, I'm sure, about multitasking and
well, let's loop back to that, right? Because I'm using corporate terms now, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the coverage. We found it interesting. We've had this discussion about how Microsoft send these devices out to people like, your Unbox Therapy, Lou, whatever his name is, MKBHD, all of these sorts of people, iJustine, all of these really popular YouTubers that are out there. And so much of the press and so much of those YouTubers, I mean, the the coverage is like, it's forehead slap sort of stuff. Like, these people don't get it. They don't get the device. Why are Microsoft sending it out there to them, right?
So tech for tech's sake, right? And that, one of my favorite sayings in sessions that we run is that the unplanned use of technology never produces a good result. And so people who are reviewing technology for technology's sake, what's the purpose of it? What's the plan for it? And this comes back to the question, right? Why do we have this device? And it's Microsoft's stated mission to help people to achieve more. And, there's definitely a sweet spot here that initially we found. We're only 6 or 8 weeks into this test of these devices. But achieving more is certainly something I've started to do on the Duo as opposed to what I could do on my single screen candy bar phone.
And I think you've really honed in on something there, which is to achieve more, right? So this phone, I don't believe it exists as, so many people in the media out there go, it's, Microsoft's attempt at an iPhone killer. Absolute ridiculous. That's a stupid notion, right? That is not what this device is. This is very much what I think it is Microsoft testing the waters. Yeah, sure, it's a second generation device. And by the way, who used an iPhone 1 or 2? Nobody, right? iPhone 3 was the one that went mass market. I'm not saying that Microsoft are going to get mass market with the Surface Duo 3, but the technology certainly gets more usable over a few generations. And companies like Apple are prepared to invest in those first generations of rubbish technology until they get to the good stuff. Microsoft are doing the same thing here, and good on them for doing it. They're testing the waters, and I think what they're trying to do is really target the early adopters. So there's this, concept of it's called the law of diffusion of innovation. A scientist called Everett Rogers, apparently, and it's about the spread of ideas. We've probably heard this sort of phrasing before: early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. Microsoft are trying to tap into. In fact, there's another category in that law of diffusion of innovation, which is the innovators themselves, people who are really at the bleeding edge of technology and trying new things. Look, we certainly put ourselves in that category. We always, we've been using pens on computers since 2002, 2003. In fact, before that, you and I were doing stuff with touchscreens way back in the early days. So we're certainly in that category of very, very early adopters, the people who are at the forefront of trying new things in terms of technology. And we've been saying for that over 20 years now, multimodal, pen, touch,
speech,
microphone, camera, all of these sorts of things are just as important as a keyboard and mouse on a computer, right? Speech, yeah, exactly. So we're in that category. And look, we were doing video conferencing back in 2003 as well. Now everybody's, the late majority has arrived to video conferencing. So we've sort of been through this technology cycle a bit. Microsoft here are not trying to tap into the early majority, the late majority. They're not trying to tap into the mass market here. They're testing a concept. Could you do more with 2 screens instead of 1? They've actually put the money down, tens of millions of dollars, no doubt, maybe even hundreds of millions of dollars into this as a project to go, could you do more? Can we get this into the hands of people and see what they're going to do with it? And that's why this phone exists. It's not an iPhone killer. It's not for you to scroll Instagram and read the news and be on TikTok and Twitter and all that sort of stuff. That's not why it exists. Most of those YouTubers, that's what the stuff that they do. They manage their socials, they produce videos, all those sorts of things. Those are not the kind of things that you're going to be doing here on the Surface Duo 2. It's not what it's for. It's for people who want to do more and achieve more. So the question is like, how do we do that, right?
Just to add to that, I've had a couple of conversations with the early adopter customers, right, who have gone and bought their own. And so the sorts of things that they want to do, one executive I spoke to in particular, he wants to replace his paper-based diary. He's looking for a way to stop. And he's had having a conversation, he's had a couple of failed attempts at, going digital instead of physical paper. So that pocketbook size device, and we're used to seeing people with a notebook, a small notebook in their top pocket, or something that they can quickly jot a note into.
Police inspectors was actually a scenario that came up in one of our sessions that we ran for Microsoft, where it was actually one of the state, because in Australia our police departments are organised by state, so they're very large, and one of the police departments in Australia was looking at the Surface Duo 2 as a way to replace the police inspector or detective or whatever their pocketbook that they would carry around and write their notes on every day. So that's a really interesting concept.
Yeah, and just on that bit of a side point, I've been watching old episodes of Law and Order. I love that show. It's one of my favourite TV shows. And you see the detectives, they have a pocketbook. And they're flipping through pages. They're taking notes. The lawyers with the yellow legal pads, they're taking notes. They're all pen-based thinking, and we've done that topic here in this channel, to the nth degree because it actually matters. And so this pocketbook style device is something that you can't get on a consumer-based smartphone. And the note.
So what we're going to do?
Sorry,
what we're going to do on that, Matt, is we're going to talk about that in depth in another video.
Cool.
The concept we want to break down and really just do a few videos on the concepts of, say, using it as a pocketbook, using it with a whiteboard app, for example.
Mm-hmm.
How does the camera perform? What sort of issues we're seeing with the camera? What's it like video conferencing on this device? We'll try and do a deep dive into each of those areas now that we've got this set up working, and we're going to see how this goes as a concept and whether our audience is engaging with it or not. But just so I wanted to come into, look at those applications a little bit more. But I just wanted to also say before we go there that there was some interesting press coverage I saw. So there was a couple of articles that I found. One was on XDA developers where, people were really, or whoever the author was of this particular article was, and I'll leave a link to it below, but was really praising the idea of the concept of the Duo, which is very much where we're at this stage. It's all about the concept, not necessarily the execution end to end right now. And another one from right here in Melbourne, the Herald Sun local newspaper, a lady there who was like really praising the idea of the two-screen Surface Duo. She compared it to, was it Penny's pocketbook, pocket computer?
From Inspector Gadget.
Yeah, right.
And what's interesting, if you look at the pictures there, is she's got a smartwatch and a computer book as well. So,
really,
a bit of a forecast.
Really
there.
ahead of its time, that series, hey? That was a really interesting comparison. So a couple of, positive articles where these people here are clearly those innovators. They fit into that real very early adopter innovator category where they see the bigger picture. They're seeing the concept and going, hey, this could work. Yeah, even though there's some bugs and issues and that sort of stuff, I can see what they're trying to do here. Most people are not going to see it that way. Microsoft, again, they're just trying to pick up at this stage and target those the small amount of people who will go, wow, this is a really interesting concept. I could apply it in all these sorts of ways, right?
And there are definitely some commercials, so some work-driven scenarios where this will be a game-changing device and a concept for people for sure.
Yep. So, and I wanted to just come back to a discussion that often comes up, especially in the enthusiast circles, which obviously this is going to sit in here. So if people are real Microsoft fans and enthusiasts, or even for the Microsoft haters and the, maybe Samsung or Apple enthusiasts, those sorts of people, they're going to say, oh, well, Microsoft has already been in the phone space and they failed, they're going to fail again, right? And it's a really interesting discussion. I've been reading a little bit, I've been reading a lot on the Surface Duo 2. It's one of the really cool things about it. It's a great book. And we'll talk about this in depth as well as a way to get away from the kind of negative stuff that we do on phones that doesn't really help our mental health, doesn't make us more intelligent, stuff like constantly scrolling the news, constantly scrolling the social media feeds.
Doom scrolling. That's the term, doom scrolling. Yeah.
Doom scrolling, right? Yeah. I mean, Twitter. Oh my God, what a cesspool that is. And I know, you and I sort of dabble in it, and like I have to go off it so many times, and I sort of have to go and delete these social media apps and go, you know what? I just don't need this in my life right now. But those are the kinds of things that we're drawn to on consumption-based devices, those candy bar phones. The Surface Duo 2 has a really good application here, and it can get you reading and doing other stuff that's actually going to make you more intelligent.
Funny, Brett, just to interrupt there, right? So what I've found is in taking this out in the wild and visiting stores and using it to pay, those sort of things, everyone that's seen me pay with this phone has gone, what's that? That's amazing looking. But it's funny what, again, from a consumer focus. So a lady at the service station, she says, that's an amazing phone. What is it? Oh, it's a Microsoft Surface Duo 2. She goes, can I look at Twitter and Facebook side by side on those two screens?
Yes, you can, but don't.
I suppose, of course you can, but why the hell would you want to?
That's horrible.
But isn't that's consumer-based thinking right there in a nutshell. Can I get multiple social media apps open at the same time? Yeah, double doom scrolling.
So I just want to put this in context again, why does this device exist, right? Microsoft back in when are we talking about, 2010, 2015, sort of somewhere in that sort of time frame, under Steve Ballmer and the end of Steve Ballmer's reign, Look, Balmer's an interesting guy, obviously a very smart man, but in Simon Sinek's terminology, he was playing a finite game, right? He was all about the results. He's very much a sales guy, clearly, and a great salesman, someone who loves to rev people up and those sorts of things, but not so much the big picture, not so much the why guy. Didn't really have, I don't think he had a really good vision of what Microsoft was trying to do at the time. What they were trying to do very heavily was defend their position as the #1 tech company in the world. And by doing that, they lost that position well and truly. These days, Microsoft is a completely different company. And like if you look at that Nokia play when they bought Nokia, as an attempt to try and make something out of Windows Phone, why did the Windows Phone exist? How was it different? I mean, we think it was a great phone. We both use the Windows phones, right? But it was a great phone. It lacked apps, right? And it was dominated at the time by Android and iOS. But why did it exist? I think it existed just to try and stop the rot, right? To try and stop people going to Apple. And, Balmer realized, hang on, all these people are going off of our platform. They're over here trying to go to Apple and Google. We need to bring them back, so we're going to do this. So rather than having a really good why, a really good vision of what they were trying to do, they were just trying to stop. They were just trying to hang on to what they had. And it's not a good reason to do something, and that's how it played out when
it's
Nadella
interesting,
came
isn't it? Because I mean, Windows Phone had so many advantages over the dominant platforms, iOS and Android. Quality of cameras, the way the apps were organized. So productivity-wise, I would say Windows Phone was well ahead of its time, and you can see some of those design elements coming through in the modern versions of Windows, right? Even though at the time they were sort of rubbished by a number of people, the Windows 8 scenario, for example, but they've definitely borne some great innovations in the tech space. But, we also saw the pivot that happened at Microsoft where they stopped trying to get you to their platform and took their apps to whatever platform you want. And, so
and that happened during that time frame, right? But like the interesting thing is, like we know, and I'm probably breaking the rules by saying this, but there was a version of the Nokia 930 out there that, and I'm pretty sure it's in the public domain, but had a Surface Pen. It actually worked with the Surface Pen. It never saw the light of day. And, that would have been a real productivity boon, but they never released it. And that, I think, tells you that they weren't really focused enough on why they exist. As a company, like Microsoft exists, they're all about Office and Windows. Bill Gates' vision was, PC on every desk. But I think that they had a bigger purpose about the company then, and through the Balmer years, I think they really lost their way on that purpose. And that's how it's played out in practice. I mean, look at the stock market. Microsoft's value has tripled apparently in the last 5 years under Satya Nadella. The interesting thing about Nadella is when he came in, he released a book pretty quickly called Hit Refresh. He really set about refreshing the culture at Microsoft. And I think that this, you see this long life cycle of innovation, because it takes years to get these sorts of products to market. The Surface Duo is a manifestation of that Nadella coming in and hitting the refresh button, right? He really came through with a renewed sense of purpose for the company, to empower every person on the planet to achieve more, and every organization, I think, as well as their current stated mission statement. That's been very consistent for the last several years, and that's why this device exists, right? It's as they say, this is not your dad's Microsoft. Microsoft has changed radically over the last 5 years, and so much for the good since Satya Nadella. I think he's maybe coming up to 7 years in the job. I'm not sure, but it's a pretty different place, and this is a manifestation of that. This is not an iPhone. This is not an Android phone per se. This is something that's completely different, and it's really in its own category, as a two-screen productivity phone.
And it's even very difficult to compare it to the fold devices, as many people are trying to do, because it's a different concept, a separate set of screens as opposed to one folding screen. And the way that the apps work on it and the operating system is trying to work with it, they're very, very different. And it is, as you just said, it's pushing the boundaries of what can be achieved in a truly mobile device.
So just on that, so what can be achieved, right? We've sort of touched on a few things already. We talked about, the pocketbook, the notebook for you to scribble down your ideas. And for me, that's been a huge boon. We're going to go into that in depth in this series. Just being able to grab the pen. I've got the what do they call this? The charging cover. The Surface Slim Pen 2 is just attached to the back there. whenever I want. I open it up, I unlock it, I click that button on the back of the pen, OneNote's ready to go there. I've got the Concepts app over here, by the way, and I can scribble down a thought that I'm having. And I've done that. In fact, all of the notes that I took for this series that we're doing here, I did on the Surface Duo wherever they came to me. You never know when a thought is going to come to you. It might be sitting in bed in the morning. It might be, for me, it's whatever reason, when I have a shower, all of the thoughts come to me and I need to quickly write something down. I'm not going to have my big Surface Pro 8 there. Being able to just grab this Surface Duo and quickly scribble down a few thoughts. It's not the ideal device for writing on by any means. Like, it wouldn't replace my Surface Pro 8. But it is very handy to have a real pen that I can scribble things with, a good size pen, and that 3:2 aspect ratio, so that I can scribble stuff down. I like to, when I can, take notes in the portrait orientation. Lots of screen space, then I can write really comfortably on the bottom screen and see what I've written at the top screen. So
yeah, that was really one of my frustrations with my Note 20 and my previous Galaxy Notes, was that the pen is just so slim. It's like a toothpick, and trying to write anything or control it was really difficult. Yeah.
I mean, I actually got one of the Samsung pens that's similar to that. It's not that one there, but it's similar size to that, to alleviate that. But of course, there's nowhere to put it, and I never really used that pen, unfortunately. Whereas here, it's magnetically attached, and that obviously adds a bit of bulk and stress to the device. Like, have I still got that pen? It's a pretty expensive pen to lose when you put it in and out of your pocket, but I found that that's pretty reliable, and I'm getting used to that. One of the other things that we've already talked about is using the device as a book, and I know you and I have both leaned pretty heavily into the Kindle app, which spans perfectly across the two screens on the Surface Duo 2. It's a brilliant place for reading, and we were talking with online with Dr. David Kellerman, who is also trying out one of these. Is from I think University of New South Wales. I can't remember.
That's right. Yep.
But very much a big Surface presenter and does a lot of stuff with the Surface team. But he was saying maybe it's nostalgia. Why do I like to see the two screens and the two books? Because his wife sort of rubbished the idea. But yeah, I think it's more than that. I do think being able to see the context of the page across the two screens is really helpful. I've always struggled to read on a candy bar phone, but I am absolutely loving this. This just feels like a paperback novel-sized book, probably slightly smaller, but I've got that kind of content across the two pages. And scrolling through, maybe there is a bit of nostalgia there, and it feels like a book.
It's one of the reasons I actually have still a monitor in portrait mode connected to my docking station, is for reading, and because it is easier to read a wider screen than it is a narrow screen. So even on the one pane of the Surface Duo, the extra width that you get on that single pane makes a difference to the reading experience. Makes it far less up and down, and you can see the lines with more clarity. You get more context in doing that.
It's like speed reading. We're just taking in more of the content, quickly. That's what I found as well. So I've been able to sort of get through pretty much a book a week since I got this Surface Duo. And really, for me, I hadn't been reading productively like that in a long time. So I think that's a really, really good thing. The other thing, using emails, being able to see the email inbox list, the email on the other side, seeing a calendar span across two screens, that stuff is all really handy. Being on a video conference, done a few video conferences on the device as well. Absolutely, it's fantastic for that. And like I said, we're going to go into that in a fair bit more detail in this series. But
and whilst we could certainly run multiple apps on the same screen on a Galaxy Note or something like that. I didn't do it. I tried it a few times, and it was almost pointless to try and run multiple apps on the same screen. Whereas here, it is very easy, and I've found it to be very productive to do.
Cool. So look, I think the key thing that we've answered is why the Surface Duo 2. Like I said, we're going to go into this in a bit more depth. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the problems with the Surface Duo 2 next. We'll do another video on that. And then we'll go into some of those different categories that we talked about in a little bit more depth, and give you a bit more of a rich view of the Surface Duo 2. I hope this wasn't too long for everybody. We had fun doing it anyway, but and we're going to put a little bit more of this together. So
who would have thought that you and I talking about technology would go for hours and hours?
Well, yeah. this is a funny thing, right? Because we do this every day. Like this is pretty much what we do. We talk about technology. Matt lives in Queensland. I'm in Melbourne, so we're normally on a Teams call like this, where we're talking about this all the time. And Matt, he helps me so much to refine most of my thoughts, and vice versa on technology. We work on our training content together, all of those sorts of things, and I think we have a big impact because of the partnership and because of the power of two. There, it's a pretty unique situation where you can actually work with your sibling. I think when we lived together, it was probably like as in at home, and when we lived in the same state, we always got along, but we had our moments. It's much easier living 2,000 kilometers apart. What's that? 1,200 miles, 1,500 miles, something.
Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, if you haven't already, subscribe and hit like on the video too, if you could please. We'll be bringing you heaps more content around the Surface Duo 2. We've got a Surface Pro 8 review coming up soon. We'll do some reviews on the Surface Duo 2 as well. And we've got lots of content about Teams, OneNote, and tons of other stuff on the channel too. So yeah, make sure that you subscribe and hit the notification bell as well.